I take a lot of joy in having a guy with tattoos all over his face who is able to create a part in CAD in 15 minutes that somebody who spends their life at a computer couldn't do. So, I think that's really awesome. And it's a shame that that's looked down upon in this country today.
Welcome back to the show Disruptors. I'm your host, Aaron Hale, and this is Point of Impact. Today's guest is a welder. That's right. A metal fabricator. John Willenborg makes products few people even know exist for vehicles many have never even heard of, to a community that's very small, but it's growing. He's the owner of Al Vans, and he makes aftermarket products, aftermarket add-ons for Sprinter and other adventure vans. They're doing all right, selling tens of millions of dollars of these products. He's no longer much of the hands-on guy. In fact, now he spends much of his time trying to find other welders that can meet industry and the exacting standards that he's set for the company. Because it's hard to find good help these days. What we talk about in the episode today is more about the culture around the education system, the stigma of blue collar versus white collar, and why it's really hard to find really good welders these days, even though he's paying over 6 figures as a starting wage. And he could have done just about anything or been anything he wanted. Growing up in Silicon Valley to a pair of white-collar parents, and he was halfway through his white-collar education at Berkeley when he decided to go a different route. Learning a couple things from his former Navy SEAL and underwater diver welder uncle of his, he chased another passion. And his uncle taught him a little perspective on hard work, and then it's okay to leave the so-called office dripping of sweat and totally fatigued. And he also taught him that welding can be a very lucrative job. But it's about finding a need in the market and filling that need. After leaving Berkeley, John started making these roof racks and other items for Sprinter vans. And because he had such an exacting detail and demand for quality of what he made, the word got around. And just that word of mouth had his products and Al Vans taking off pretty quickly. Before he knew it, the demand was more than he could handle himself. We'll talk about what it means to him to have grit and work on enjoyment of working a hard day, and a whole lot more. Before we get into it, if you wouldn't mind, please like, subscribe, share it with somebody. Get this episode out to a broader audience for us. It's an important message because we don't all have to get a 4-year degree, and there shouldn't be a stigma around blue-collar jobs. Would you rather everybody get a PhD in breakdancing? I don't know how lucrative it is, but I don't know. It could be fun. Anyways, without further ado, my conversation with John Willenborg. John, welcome to Point of Impact.
Oh, thanks so much for having me. Pleasure to be here.
Well, I'll tell you what, like I talked to you earlier, is that yours might have been my favorite episode on Mike Rose podcast, the way I heard it. And it's one of those things I think we lost sight of decades ago, and people are coming around
but your story puts, it's a great example of why, even though college, university, and that route may be a great plan for some, it's not the only route. And there are plenty of other ways to make a living, create a life, and have a fulfilling, future without that college degree. And
Yeah.
I'd really, I'd love for you to kind of share about the decision, that decision tree, right? That you go through when you're expecting to go. You expected to, there's this pressure and expectation once you leave high school to go to college. So what was that like for you?
Yeah, well, I really appreciate that. And I think it's something that needs to be talked about. And one of my favorite parts of that whole experience with Mike Rowe is kind of twofold. One, Mike is one of the most down to earth folks that I've ever met. And he is, kind of entranced by, the stories people have regardless of who they are. So he's not about having celebrities on his podcast. He's not about, catering to whatever the current narrative in the media is. He's about telling real stories about real people. And that is so relatable. And so that's one of the things that I really, really love about him is how down to earth he is and how he can take someone who most people would find seemingly, uninteresting and tell their story and allow people to come away with something, a different perspective. And so I love Mike and I love what he's doing. And I also, the second aspect that I was really happy with is what they named the episode. And I think that's the best way to surmise it. The episode was named Coming Out Blue Collar. And I think that it's both funny and not funny at the same time, because, that's really what I felt like. It's like you've got all these people in your life. And my father was, an electrical engineer, Stanford MBA, very well educated. All my friends were, going to Ivy Leagues, getting jobs in finance, internships with Goldman Sachs. And I graduated and no part of that appealed to me. No part of staying up for 4 days and looking at spreadsheets so that I could one day get a job that's soulless and make a bunch of money, but hate every waking minute of what I did. And I couldn't do it. And I've always been a hands-on person. For folks that haven't heard that episode, my background, outside of education, I went to work for my uncle, who was a former Navy SEAL turned deep sea oil rig welder. So certainly an individual that likes to do the tougher things in life. And I always joke that if you think you work hard, go work for a Navy SEAL and you'll learn that you don't. And, but he taught me at a young age how to fabricate, how to work hard, and kind of like, who cares about your excuses? Did you get it done? And, that was a really good lesson to have young. And then beyond that, I just loved making things. I was not someone that is meant to sit in front of a computer. And so I started taking automotive classes in the summer, knowing that I was never going to be a mechanic or a tech. But being a generalist is so important. And I think that, one of the quotes, my favorite quotes is, a lot of people hear the quote, "Jack of all trades, but master of none." And they don't realize that that's only part of the quote.
It's incomplete.
Exactly. And it's making it sound like a jack of all trades is a bad thing and that being a master of one is a good thing. And I actually feel the opposite. I like to hire generalists that have a lot of experience from different backgrounds. And the real quote or the full quote is, "Jack of all trades, master of none is better than a master of one." And what it's saying is that it's actually better to be a generalist. So doing things like taking finance classes in college, but then also after school going and turning wrenches on a car with your uncle, or going to an automotive class, or taking engineering or CAD classes on the side. And that was my passion. And when I graduated, I felt a lot of shame about wanting to work with my hands and do things with my hands. And finally I said, who the hell am I worried about offending? If this is what I want to do with my life, I'm going to bend metal. I'm going to weld things. I'm going to make auto parts. I'm going to design products. And that's what I did. And I love it. And thankfully, we've been blessed with a lot of success with Owl. And I find that that's not a unique experience. There's so many people, the amount of obscenely smart people I have at this company that also like to work with metal and build things. And I don't think people realize that doing jobs that are considered blue collar, which used to be respected in this country, that now takes such an incredible level of intelligence to run the CAD software, to use the lasers, to make sure that everything's operating properly. These are killingly bright people that walk in with tattoos all over their body in a pickup truck, and they know what a hard day's work is. And so, I take a lot of joy in having a guy with tattoos all over his face who is able to create a part in CAD in 15 minutes that somebody who spends their life at a computer couldn't do. So, I think that's really awesome. And it's a shame that that's looked down upon in this country today.
And I think it started with just the labeling and white collar, blue collar, and the fact that, one or two, maybe just of a different class. My family, you could say they were upper middle class, coming up in the Ohio suburbs, and it was just expected to go to college. And I did the same thing. I went to college and had no idea what I was going to do.
Yeah.
Literally trying to make up a major or, do something that was so nondescript and without a passion, without a purpose. Of course, I was just destined to fail. So,
and we went to school when it wasn't the cost that it is now. I mean, my whole education, I went to Berkeley, UC Berkeley, and my whole education was like 15 grand. And, now I would be in debt hundreds of thousands of dollars, and people don't realize that. And I joke about this, but if you graduate with an interpretive jazz dance degree, like nobody bothers to say to that person, what the heck job are you going to get? And even if you do get a job that pays you, do you realize that getting a degree in dance is, and I'm not looking down upon dancers, it's fantastic, but dear God, don't pay 400 grand for it. There's got to be a cost benefit analysis. So if you love dance, go be a dancer. Don't spend 400 grand to get a certificate that says you've studied dance. That is a complete waste of time. Now, if you want to be a mechanical engineer, go to college. Absolutely. But it's also not the only way. I was,
it's an investment. Education is an investment, but there are certainly bad investments out there. And you've got to actually
look at school.
Yeah, you've got to do the cost and benefit analysis, right? And so if you're going to invest in some kind of NFT or crypto, something that really has no value on the back end except hope. Then the same is with an education that, it may be a passion, but if it's not going to pay you back, after the fact. And then there are, concrete ways of actually measuring what the educations could be worth to you.
It's fascinating. Take a place like Google. Google is renowned for having probably the most difficult interview process kind of out there. It's renowned for it. I had a company previously, I made parts for Apple and then sold that company, and I had worked closely with a lot of the mobile team at Google and was looking at a job with them. And my interview process was 6 months. I think I had something like 14 different interviews, and no one there cared where I went to college. And in fact, the lead person who was kind of managing my whole process was a high school dropout. And now he was fairly high up at Google. They do not care. They don't care what your college is. They don't care what your degrees are. What they care about is how you think. And the fascinating thing about the interview, and one of the questions that kind of sticks out in my mind, is they would ask questions like, how many trains are required in France to get everyone to work? And that's not a question you can study for, right? And no one knows that, right? No, I don't know how many trains are in France. I don't know how many employees need to get to work. And so what you have to do is sit there and you go through and they look at your thought process. So you're like, okay, what's the population of France? Okay, well, France is roughly geographically, the size of half of California. And, California has X amount of people. So let's say France has, 20 million people. What percentage of those people commute to work? Okay, with an unemployment rate that's roughly, 10%. That means 80% of those 20 million have a job. How many take a train to work? It's probably a much higher percentage than those in the US because there's much more access to trains in France. And you go through this thought process, and they don't care if you actually get the number of trains right. What they care about is how are you thinking about it? Are you thinking through how many people fit on a train? Are you thinking through how many people would use a train every day? How many geographic miles of train track are in France? And these are answers that, yes, you could Google, but nobody really has the knowledge of. And those are the kind of questions they ask because they want to see how you think. They don't look at you and go, oh, do you have an MBA? Oh, can you write this line of code? So anyway, I just think it's really fascinating that some of the most successful companies in the world don't care about your education. They care about how you think. The same is true of Tesla, SpaceX. They're hiring people that are high school dropouts that have a passion for something and know how to think critically. And so what I would argue is do something that you're passionate about, learn about it, do things that are hard, do things you don't like doing, but learn. And the once you have skills in a variety of disciplines and you know how to critically think, you are set up to be successful regardless of what pieces of paper you have.
And those more and more companies I've been hearing, these corporations are stepping away from the 4-year degree or master's or, post bachelor's degree requirements just because of that. Is because as the cost of universities inflate and that degree, the value of the degree deflates. And
it's also not even, they grade inflate now. So when I was in school, I started out in mechanical engineering at Berkeley. And when one of my first classes talk about feeling meek and insignificant, there were probably 2,000 or 3,000 people in this auditorium. And the professor starts out and he says, look, this was back when we had SATs and you had 800 for math, 800 for verbal, 1,600 was a perfect score.
Mm-hmm.
And the professor starts out and says, look around you because we grade on the curve. That means 50% of the people in this auditorium will no longer be students at Cal Berkeley by the end of this semester. And keep in mind as well that we only have 10% of the people in this room that did not score an 800 on their math SAT. So understand what you're walking into. So I had a room of thousands of people that are the best math minds in the world. And they're saying half of you are not only not going to pass, but you're gone. You no longer have a spot in this class or in this university. And so, A, talk about terrifying you, but B, that wouldn't happen now. Now, if you get into Harvard, I think the average grade point at Harvard's like, and obviously someone I'm sure will correct this, but it's like a 4.1. The average is over an A. It's obscene. Back when I graduated from Cal, I think if you graduated Cal with a 3.0 or above, that was good.
Mm-hmm.
And now everyone graduates with a 4 point. So not only do you have something that you paid a lot of money for, but the reason companies don't put any merit in it is because you didn't do anything for it. If you have a pulse, you get a 4.0. And the reason you get the 4.0 is because you paid $500,000 for it. And the school's not going to let you pay $500,000 and flunk out. So it's not worth the paper it's printed on.
So it's no longer meritocracy. It's not.
Exactly.
So not only is the price, the cost inflating, but it's being devalued in other ways. Because it's just meaningless paper and really expensive, meaningless paper.
I mean,
But
there
was also something you mentioned before about, when you went to school and you went to a school full of, the alpha, the winners, and being, among everybody who was used to winning, and then how that is discouraging.
Yeah.
Can you explain what you meant by that?
Yeah, I think it's a really important point because it's obvious once someone brings it up, but it's something that is not something that I think necessarily would be top of mind if you didn't know about it. So, sorry, I lost my train of thought here for a second. Sorry, refresh me on the question one more time. I just literally got over COVID last week, so I got a bit of brain fog going.
Well, it was going into a place where it was everybody is used to winning.
Oh yeah. So thank you, and hopefully we can edit my complete brain fog out. But what happens is, and I think you experience this in sports as well. I was an athlete at Cal, and I think a sports analogy is a really good way to kind of quantify this. And that is my first day, kind of on the field at Cal. I was playing rugby at the time, and Cal has one of the best teams in the country. And the athletes there, to give you an idea of the athletes, we had, I think, 5 folks from our team drafted to the NFL that didn't play football. So, and then they played in the NFL for years. So, to give you an idea of the quality of the athletes. So there was a guy that I was going against that ended up being drafted as a fullback for the Minnesota Vikings. So here I am, a freshman, at Cal, 18 years old, and I get sent out one-on-one against this guy, and I think I'm going to drop him like I dropped people in high school. And I went to make a full hit, and not only did I half miss him, but he didn't even notice that it was like a mosquito. I bounced right off. And immediately in my brain, I'm sitting there going, that dude's twice my size. And now I realize he's faster. And this whole game is played at a level that my brain can't even comprehend. And eventually you kind of start to make those changes, or you realize that it's not for you, and you crumble. And so I think that what happens when you send your student or your child to a university that is, for example, that math class, I felt like I was going to fail. And I ended up going into engineering, and I have successful companies designing products and engineering products. And I had a love of mechanical engineering, but it made me feel like I was stupid, because instead of going to a school and graduating with an engineering degree at a school where I would have been one of the top students, instead, if you go to, an MIT, a Caltech, one of these types of schools where it's the best of the best, you have people that are in the top 1,000 in the world of that discipline, but there's somebody who graduated last in their math class at MIT, and they're way smarter than me, and they're way smarter than all of us, but they still graduated last at MIT. So they feel like a complete failure. And maybe they had a passion for math growing up, and it was what made their, to sound cheesy, but it's what completed their passion and their soul. And now they're sitting there going around like, well, I'm a failure because I came in dead last in my math class. So a lot of them will drop out and they won't do math. They won't become that professor. They won't continue to work on whatever that discipline was. And I think Malcolm Gladwell, who I'm a huge fan of, said it really succinctly. He said, don't send your student or your child to a university. If they're great at music, don't send them to Juilliard, where they're going to feel like they suck and they'll probably lose their love of music because they're insecure. Send them someplace where they can compete against who they're going to be competing with in the real world and then see how they do. And they won't lose their passion for it, because I think we're doing a disservice to people who are very good at what they do. And I came very close to never doing engineering and never building products for a living. And I think that that's what I'm good at. And that's what my passion is. And going to Berkeley, competing against the best of the best, was the worst thing I could have done.
It's also, it's also a great plan for a more affordable education, like a 4-year degree. Is go somewhere, do community college, do maybe one of the smaller state schools, and get a good education, hone those skills, maybe do post-grad at one of the bigger names in the programs.
Absolutely. You can save yourself a ton of money doing that too. If you want to get a degree, go to JC for 3 years. It's also easier to get into schools.
Right.
I had so many friends that I went to school with where they went to a JC for 3 years, transferred to Berkeley for the last 2, and their degree still said Berkeley on it. And they paid, back then even less, but it's also, in that JC, you can decide whether or not this really is something you love, because you're not enjoying it because you think you're bad at it. You're actually seeing, okay, I'm against a bunch of folks in JC. I'm going to see how I actually do, because these are the folks that I'm actually competing against in the world. So, going back to that sports analogy, the person who loses their first 100-meter race at the Olympics is still unbelievably fast. They're one of the fastest 20 people in the world, but do they feel good? No, they feel like crap.
It's like, the other side of that is the passion, the desire to be there. There wasn't Sean Aker, in his book, The Happiness Advantage, just told us a whole story about going to Harvard and seeing that same thing where all these students who are the big fish in little ponds all over the world, and they all get together and they're all competing against people who are just as smart as them or smarter, and they're all miserable, all of them.
Yep.
And him being from some small town in Texas who he thought was, he believed he got it. He was like Harry Potter at Hogwarts, right? So, and it actually, Harvard actually looks like Hogwarts, but, he was happy to be there. He thought it was a gift. He thought it was like a bonus prize that he was allowed in, and he enjoyed it. And he was actually studying something he wanted, so it was easy for him. And nobody could believe that nobody understood why he wasn't miserable with the rest of them. So,
it makes sense.
So,
humans are relative. Our experience and our happiness is based on relativity and not Einstein relativity. But there are a bunch of studies, and I find it fascinating because I would not be this way, where they ask, okay, here's your option. You can make $100,000 a year, and all of the other people you work with make $150,000 a year. So you're making $100,000, but you're the lowest paid person in the same job. Mm-hmm. Or you can make $50,000 and everyone you work with makes $30,000. So you're making half the money, but you make almost double what everyone else makes for the same job. And people almost always choose making less money, the $50K, but making more money than their peers. So it's all relative. And if you want to be happy, you unequivocally have to break yourself of the comparison, the constant comparison. Oh, that person's got a nicer house. Because guess what? And this is going to make me sound so far from blue collar, but we had a friend, and I actually had no idea that they had money, because I don't really care, and I'm not going to ask them what their finances is. And we've only ever hung out at, like, it's really my wife's friend, and I've only ever hung out with them at restaurants and so on. So I've never been to their house. I don't know what their house looks like. Mm-hmm. So they got this amazing boat and something I could never afford. And they invited us on the boat. And of course, they're looking at other boats, and all of a sudden there's like, I realized looking out on these other boats that everyone on those boats that doesn't have the biggest boat doesn't feel good about themselves. And it's insane. it's like, and I'm sitting there going, the people that own these boats that I'm seeing around, out here are the nicest things I've ever seen in my life. But somewhere in one of those boats one of those yachts that costs, that you see that's enormous, and it's got a boat in a boat. There's somewhere on that ship looking at, whoever, like Mark Zuckerberg's yacht that has 2 helicopter pads on it, and they feel like crap because their yacht doesn't have 2 helicopter pads. And I'm sitting there going, boy, if this isn't clarity on what we need to and worry about and what we don't, if you are judging your happiness based on what other people have, you will be miserable your entire life. If you can reframe it and say, oh my God, I can't afford this boat, but I'm still on a boat. Someone invited me here and I got to spend the day on this boat, and it's a once in a lifetime thing, and it's amazing and I love it and it's glorious. But you know what I'm not going to do is feel bad about my life because I can't afford to go on that boat myself. And I'm okay with that.
Well, I wouldn't agree with all the same having a boat or a helicopter, but they refused to give me a driver's license anyway, so I don't think I'm going to get a pilot's license. But see, you didn't have the passion for what you were studying. You were in classes. You were in a class of elite students, and you were looking at the direction you were going, and it just wasn't. It wasn't what you wanted.
Yep.
And so, where did you go? What did you do then?
Yeah, I've had kind of an odd journey. I've always been passionate. I've always been entrepreneurial. My father was entrepreneurial, and I've had a passion for solving problems. And it's interesting. We're all given, I think, unique talents and deficits. I'm very dyslexic. I cannot read, spell, or anything to save my life. It's horrendous. I asked my 9-year-old daughter to proofread stuff. Or sorry, my son's 9. I was asking my 9-year-old daughter, she's now 12, but I was asking her when she was 9 to proofread what I wrote because I absolutely cannot. I can't read and I can't spell and I can't do those things. And so that is an area where I am horrendously deficient. But spatial visual stuff, I can solve. I've worked with some of the best engineers in the world at Apple and so on. I can solve mechanical problems very quickly and easily in my head. Everyone is a little bit different in that regard. So for me, I really struggled in school. I was always slower at doing things than other people. My reading was really, really a struggle for me. I struggled with all aspects of, how dyslexia would impact my schooling. And the place where I wasn't bad and I didn't feel less than was when it came to building things and solving problems mechanically. And so I ended up gravitating towards that. I didn't like the jobs I was in. I wasn't a fan of sitting at a desk and reading emails all day. It's not what I'm good at. And so eventually I said, I can't do this anymore. And I started my own company. And every time I've now started really 3 companies. And not all of it has gone swimmingly, but you learn from each one. And if there is a single indicator of success, it's grit. Can you persevere through things that aren't easy and aren't fun? And when a company's going great, it's super fun. And when it's not going great, it's not very fun. But you have to learn to take those lessons from each failure. And I don't know a single entrepreneur that hasn't had failures. And so each time I failed, I did a postmortem and I looked at what worked. I looked at what didn't. And here we are now. I'm 43 years old. Sorry, 44. I forget. And I've taken, 20 plus years of successes and failures. And all of those things have prepared me for when I started Owl, and I knew what the differentiators were. And so what happened when I started this company is I knew we had a good product, but I looked at the other companies in the space and I saw them making mistakes that I made in the past. And I saw opportunities to do it differently, do it better than what they were doing. And I won't bore people with the specifics, but I knew that if I executed to my plan, we would be successful. Now, did I think we would be this successful? No, but that was all from those bruises that I took along the way in other companies. And I think that's critically important to understand, that if people are going to do their own thing, they're going to have failure.
That's so funny. I spent my entire 45th year thinking I was 44 until somebody said, happy 46th birthday. I said, wait, no. What? It's like, thinking it's a Thursday, tomorrow's will be Friday, when it's actually, Friday, and you lost an entire day somewhere. No, I lost a whole year.
Well, and kids cannot comprehend that. Like, my 12-year-old, my 9-year-old are just like, wait, you don't know how old you are? Because to them, it's such a big deal. And I'm like, no, you lose track. They're like, that's not possible. I was like, wait, after you hit about 35, you just lose track, because you're just getting older and there's no more milestones. It's not like you're going to get the right to vote or the right to drink alcohol or anything. Like, there are no more bonuses. There's just more wrinkles and more things that hurt.
I sure did miss the cakes and the party hats and balloons and stuff. I got to buy them myself now. But that was so interesting that you mentioned the dyslexia, and because it'll come out maybe 1 or 2 episodes before yours. But I just spoke with Justin Breen of the Ep68 Mastermind, and he's another one of those guys that he believes that these learning differences, what they call them, neurodiverse, is the new term I just learned, which is what we replace learning disorder with. But he believes that ADD and those others, there are signs of genius. Mm-hmm. And I thought that was an interesting take, because my whole family is full of geniuses. My dad and I both also ADHD, dyslexic, and my brother, it's all in our but
well, that brings up a really interesting point. And I think this is a message that really needs to get out there. In addition to the fact that there are people that are meant to work with their hands and not with a keyboard, and that needs to be accepted and okay. I think this whole historical version of what's normal, everyone wants to have a normal kid, 10 fingers, 10 toes, all this stuff. What is normal? And pardon the expression, but I think normal is bull. And the reason I think normal is bull is because it's boring, and you don't get Tesla and SpaceX from normal. You don't get Facebook from normal. You get middle management at Tire Rack from normal. And so one of the things that happened is, I had a good friend of mine who used to work for me, and his first son, super athletic, super outgoing, like everything super, air quotes, normal, right?
Mm-hmm.
Second kid on the autism spectrum. And he was really struggling with this as a parent. And one of my best friends, my father, I think, is on the autism spectrum, but he grew up long before, he's in his 80s. He grew up long before that was a thing. And one of my best friends on the spectrum. And I said to my other friend who had this child who was on the autism spectrum, I said, let me ask you a question. If you had a choice between going out with a middle manager of an insurance company to dinner, or going out to dinner with Mark Zuckerberg or Elon Musk, or any of these people that are, as you said, neurodivergent, are they different? Are their social skills maybe not where other people's are? Sure. But my God, how interesting that conversation would be. How interesting that dinner would be. And look at what they've created. Who cares about normal? Normal is BS. Humans aren't normal. Every single person has genetic variation. Every single person is different. And that difference is what has allowed us to thrive throughout history. ADD, sure. That made us want to not sit around. It made us want to do things. It made us want to go collect berries, try to climb this cliff and see what's up on the other side. It made humans venture out and do things. And those are critical aspects for humankind making progress. And so this whole BS idea of normal, I think we really need to get away from that. If my kid had Asperger's or autism, I would be like, I cannot wait to see what you're going to do in the world and how you're going to bring your unique way that your brain functions to this earth.
It's another way we've labeled things, and we renamed and we organized and prioritized and things that maybe we don't understand and it doesn't fit in the cookie cutter easy model, like you say, normal. So, go to school, get good grades, get a good job. And that's the proven formula for having a secure, safe, and okay life. And same with, these neurodiverse, the oddballs, right? That's a learning disability. And we should, look down on them like we look down on blue collar.
Yep.
But the truth is, you can have a great life. You can have a fulfilling life. And
you can change humankind. People, I mean, we might, and again, people have different thoughts on Elon Musk because of political views, but put all the politics of Elon Musk aside. The guy's trying to go to Mars. The guy has created satellite internet that is bringing internet to areas of the world that have no access to information, that have totalitarian governments that control the internet, control access to information. And now I have a Starlink sitting out here that is smaller than a sheet of paper with a router in it that can, run off of a battery for a drill. And that can be put in a backpack. And that is world-changing technology. Electric cars, lithium batteries. That is world-changing technology. And that doesn't come from someone that's, again, air quotes, normal, And so we need to stop labeling, as you said, like learning disability and all these things. My son, we just moved to Phoenix 2 years ago with the business. And my son thinks like me. And I said to my wife, I was like, and this was a couple of years ago, I said, we need to get him tested for dyslexia because I didn't get tested until I was almost out of high school. And at that point, I just thought I couldn't do things or I was dumber than other people. And it really hurt me and made life difficult. And with my son, I said, he thinks like me. We need to get him tested. She's like, he's fine. He's fine. I didn't give up. We got him tested and they're like, yeah, he's very dyslexic and he's behind in all these areas. And we found a wonderful school and they have a lot of kids there and they cater to what used to be called learning disabilities. But and it almost makes me emotional. He's proud of his dyslexia now because he's like, my dad has dyslexia and look at the company he built. And he's like, so-and-so, CEO came to talk at our school and he's dyslexic. And he told his story and he's one of the CEOs of the biggest companies in the world or whatever, or so-and-so basketball player came and he made the all-star team and he's dyslexic. And so he's seeing all of these people that he can look up to, admire and be his hero. And he has zero shame about his learning disability. He will sing it from the rooftops. And that's everything to me because he doesn't feel less than. And he's not less than. He's freaking brilliant. And to hear the way his mind works and distills complex ideas into simple explanations and so on, I know how successful he's going to be. Can he read? Yes. Is he good at it? No. And I don't care.
And it's not that you're reading wrong or you're thinking wrong or your brain doesn't work the right way. It's seeing the world from a different perspective. You see the world in a different way. So, I was just thinking, dyslexic, so Richard Branson, also dyslexic.
Yeah.
And, it's so many of these people. And what happens is because it's not easy to do it the way everybody else does, you build up different muscles, different abilities, and you become stronger than most around you at doing things because it took you more effort.
Yeah.
So you are used.
Let me ask you, because obviously, when we started this, you reached out and you said, I'm blind and I'm deaf. And, I'd be very curious to see how those challenges, because a lot of people would wallow in a world of depression. And I guess I would want to ask, how do you see the world? And pardon the use of the term see, but how do you experience the world differently now? How do you think it's changed? Has it benefited? I know the brain is very plastic and rewires. So parts of the brain that, might be used for vision get used for other things. And I'm really curious if you experience the world differently now and how you've kind of overcome those challenges. And maybe you've talked about this a lot on your podcast, but just human to human, what is that like to experience the world differently? And how have those challenges changed you?
We know that could fill multiple podcast episodes. Is hilarious that, you know, I went blind and deaf. So I did what anybody in my situation would do. I started a podcast. But before then, I actually started a fudge company and then started investing in real estate and doing all the things that would have been thought of as impossible for a person who's blind and deaf. As a veteran, they give you this vocational rehabilitation training, and it's a great resource, but they say, okay, you can learn how to, stock vending machines. And I'm thinking, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to own the vending machines and I'm going to hire people to stock them. And I'm thinking, whatever I'm going to do, it has to be as efficient as possible. And I need to be that visionary like you and our friend Justin Brand and many others. Because even before the blindness and the deaf, there was ADD, ADHD, and I can put things together in my head. And also that's another interesting thing about how visually based our language is. And I still use those sight words because that's what everybody understands. But I have to put together the plan in my head, the order, who is going to be the best team, best person on the team for what I want to accomplish. And then I've got to tell the story and I've got to make believers out of these team members so that together we can accomplish what I and ultimately we want to accomplish. So
it's just probably an odd question. What in your life is better now than it was when you had your sight and your hearing? Like, what benefit have you taken from it? Because nobody gets to where you are without seeing a benefit to it. You have to look at things that happen in your life. They may not seem good at the time, but is there anything you took from this where you're like, I wouldn't have this if I didn't have this happen to me?
Am I already on your podcast or?
I'm sorry. I'm just interested.
Mm-hmm.
I love stories. I can stop asking questions. I'm sorry.
No, that's great. And you know what? I appreciate that because, the first thing I thought of was how much, I appreciate all the little things and all the big things more. I'm slowing down and realizing that every moment I have with my children, with my 3 boys, is important. And I don't ever tell them no. I don't ever, tell them just 1 minute while I finish this email, or at least I try not to. And
sure,
everything becomes, because here's one of the things, it's a dichotomy. Because I am disabled, having a learning disability, I have other disabilities, or what do you want to call it? Visually diverse. I don't know. But, I have to rely on others quite a bit. So then I'm always looking for more opportunities to serve others. And it's my way of maybe paying it forward or paying it back or however you want. But I'm always thinking of how I can provide for others. And it's made my life so much more rich, so much richer just by living it's a life of abundance.
Yeah. That's really, really interesting. And I know personally, and I can't speak for you, but I think I know the mindset of folks like yourself who, are veterans and are used to doing things ourselves. I like to just do it myself. And so for me to rely on other people to do things would be an incredibly hard transition for me. But hearing you say that, I can see how, if you were to accept that and then pay it forward, it could be incredibly rewarding.
Well, it's two sides of the same coin. And like in sales, you realize, you're not asking for people's money in exchange for something. You're offering something and expecting, that return. It's, it may be, 6 of one, half dozen the other, but by offering more, by making more connections, by becoming a greater value in society, by providing something that fills a need the society provides for you. So you found within this, the Sprinter van community, which I think is the coolest thing. It's another thing I wish I could do, like the boats and the helicopters.
Yeah.
You found
it's not my normal life. I'll be clear with that. That was someone, I just want to be really clear, that was a cool opportunity that I didn't turn down, but by no means do I live the boat life.
Well, that was one example, but, you're doing things that fill the need, right? And, so how do you rule your life? Like, how does, doing building these businesses, how does, falling into the role that you wanted rather than the role that you thought you were supposed to be in, the path that was laid out for you, how does that make your life richer?
That's a really good question. I have found kind of like a second family with this business, and we're slow to hire, fast to fire. I know that sounds bad, but I want to surround myself with the best possible people. And when you surround yourself with people that are really good at what they do and they're competent and they work hard and you start to have some success, it's one of the greatest feelings out there. And it's why I love going to work every day. It's seeing what we do and what we build, and actually making things has some sort of, visceral satisfaction as a human, right? When you make a piece of software and send it out, yes, they can see the software, but it's not the same feeling, I think, as a human as if you were in the wilderness and you built a log cabin and you stood back and you're like, I built that, like there's something really satisfying about that. And I think for me, that's what makes me satisfied. So at the end of the day, looking at whether it's creating new products or literally making items, that is what makes me excited. And so, I love my job, but on the same side, you can't do what we do. Anyone that is an entrepreneur, this is a quote that I love too I attribute it to Lance Armstrong. I don't know if it's from him or not, but that's what I was originally told. And a reporter asked him, you've won X number of Tour de France's so far. It must be easy at this point. And he said, it's never easy. You're just going faster. And so what he means is no matter how good a shape you get in, you're still hanging on by your fingernails because there's someone next to you that's hanging on by their fingernails and they're just as good a shape. And so the interesting thing about growing a business is if you're just starting out, you're working around the clock. Your business is your life. And when you get a bigger business, you have the same exact problems. The numbers are just bigger. I'm no longer worried about one sale. I'm worried about thousands of sales. But it's the same stress. And you have to not let yourself get sucked into that permanently. You can do it for a while. And there's times where you have to commit yourself 100% to a business. But to your point, I have young kids and well, if they're not that young anymore, how fast that goes. And as I get older, I realize how unimportant it is to have a huge bank account and how unimportant it is to get those attaboys from people about a successful business. And what's important to me is that I have that time with my kids. And to your point, I think it's really, really critical. And I know what you mean when you said, I don't say no. Obviously, it means you don't discipline your kids, but it means that when they say, hey, dad, can we go for a swim? Hey, dad, can we go ride scooters? That you just do it. Because when, you look back 20 years from now, you're going to wish you could ride scooters with your kid because they're going to be a grown adult. And those times are so special and so important to those kids. So, I go home at a normal hour. I work my butt off when I'm here. And if my family's out of town, like this last weekend, my family went out of town. I was in the office the entire weekend. But if they're in town, I'm playing with my kids because that is what keeps you sane as a person. And nobody on their deathbed is ever like, I wish I spent more hours in the office and did not, go swimming with my kid.
Yeah, and thank you for that clarification there about not disciplining. But I actually do try not to say the N word, no, to my kids. In fact, even when, for example, the twins, identical twin boys are 5, because I shouldn't be the only one that's confused. But if one of them comes up to me and says, hey, Dad, can I shove this fork into the wall outlet? I'm not going to say no. I'm going to say, sure. Before you do that, let me show you what might happen. And it turns into a teaching opportunity. And being a former bomb technician in the Army, right? EOD tech, we have a lot of fun working with circuitry. So in fact, one of our classes, we used to build, little tasers out of disposable cannons, if you can still find those things.
Wow.
And then shock each other. So I'm not shocking my son, but I'll show them an experiment with, electricity. Like, that's what's going to come out of there. And do you still want to shove a fuck in there? Anyways, what I wanted to ask you too, though, is that given the neurodiverse lineage in your family and starting these businesses, has it also been about making those connections, right? Not just with people, but the ideas. Trying to find the that need, whether it's the general market, the need inside your business, and how have you felt that say, how do you wear that hat?
Yeah, I think a lot of that is born out of competitiveness and drive. And I loved sports my whole life. And there's a point, it's really interesting. We all play, not all, but we have the opportunity to play team sports when we're younger. Some people have the opportunity to continue to play sports for a while, but almost nobody plays sports, the vast majority, at my age. And yeah, you can go to the local basketball gym and play rec basketball, but the fact of the matter is you're not really competing for anything. You're not at what I like to call the sharp end of the field, right? Because you get older and you can't keep up and you have to work and all these things. And so, there is almost like a mourning that has to happen one of my favorite passions in the world was racing motorcycles. It's why I got into vans in the first place. And I loved it so much and it made me feel so alive. And I had such a drive to be good at it. But then you reach a point where you have kids and you have to take your safety becomes important. And you also have to provide for them and you have to commit more time to work. And it's not about you anymore. And so you have to channel those competitive juices and that passion into something else. And I've channeled that into kind of what you said. It's about finding a need, building the best product, being passionate about something. And in a sense, it's like a mini game. We have competitors, and I was actually talking to one of my team members here this morning about a competitor to ours. And I said, I don't really have the animosity I had when we first started out against that person. And he said, yeah, but you know what? that animosity, because they did us dirty, that animosity fueled you guys to be successful. And I'm like, you're right. We worked so hard to beat them that it made us better. You know, every Coke needs a Pepsi. And so I think that, we are able to channel that competitive spirit into business. And I think that that's a way to kind of scratch that itch. But yeah.
There's definitely duality there, dichotomy, the give and take of the motivators, from gratitude and humility to animosity and just the hunger to beat your competitor. It goes the same with being the visionary and, at least being in part or having somebody to counter that with or balance that with an integrator, right? The one that's going to take the action and put the plan to work. So there's I think somebody said, entrepreneur, two emotions as an entrepreneur: sheer elation and abject despair. And that's one of those things, is that to be a successful business owner, successful entrepreneur, you have to step out from that, that safety, so-called safety of a corporate life. And you have to take the responsibility, not just for yourself and your family and the business, whatever that is on paper, but then for the success of the people that you've brought with you, that have signed on for the vision. But it becomes a shared responsibility and a shared mission, just like on the sports team, is that not only are you working for all of those motivators, but so are they. And that's when you've got a good mission and you've got some great leadership. This is when everybody's on board and facing the right direction and doing their very best.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree.
So, what's on the horizon for that? What are you excited about?
I'm excited about what we can build here. I think that you don't always get a convergence of being in the right place, the right time, and having a good team. So I'll call it, timing and then competence. And I'm not talking about myself. I'm talking about the team. You get plenty of opportunities where it doesn't work out. If you opened a restaurant right before COVID hit, I don't care how good a business person you are, you're screwed. But the opposite is true as well. Sometimes you open a restaurant and then right next door, they build a ballpark and you're like crushing it. And maybe your restaurant would have been successful independently, but take the wins you can get, because you're going to have the opposite happen too. And I've had that happen in businesses where I thought I had a really good product, a good team, and the kind of macro timing of things weren't advantageous for us. So I think it's the opposite with Owl. I think that we were able to establish a beachhead early in this industry, and it's grown exponentially, and it's still growing exponentially. And there are areas of opportunity that we're finding every day. And my goal at this point is to build a monster, if you will. It's to see how far we can push this thing. And because I don't think you get many opportunities like this. And I say this to our team too. I'm like, not many people get to start a business where it's a couple of us making stuff by hand in a garage to the point where we are today, where we have, a massive building here in our headquarters. We have satellite locations all over the US and soon to be all over the world. And then just walking around and seeing the equipment and the vehicles and seeing semi trailers come in and out of your building all day, dropping stuff off, picking stuff up, and just seeing that machine operate. It's pretty mind blowing. And I walk around and I have that imposter syndrome too, which I think people don't talk about enough. that when I realized that, hey, all of this at the end of the day comes down to me making decisions, and that's scary. And all those people's lives and their success are in my hands. And I haven't done this before. And all I can do is trust my gut. But there's definitely like hey, shouldn't someone that knows what they're doing be running this place? And so, so essentially what's next is we're venturing from, the size business we are now into a business that is something I never would have dreamed would be that size. And that I don't know how to do that. So I'm sure I'll make some mistakes as I go, and I'm going to tap some really smart people for some advice as I grow. But so there's fear at every level. I think there's fear for people leaving their corporate job and starting something for themselves. I think there's fear in people saying, hey, instead of getting this degree, I'm going to go to North Dakota and weld and make a lot of money and choose a different path. And there's insecurity in going from, 6 or 7 locations up to 20 and building your staff from, 100, 200 to 500. I mean, those are big, scary things. And so I'm going to try to maximize this because our timing was good, but I still have a lot of anxiety about making sure that I execute for all those people.
Well, tell me, let's go a little bit deeper on Owl, how that came about, why it was advantageous right around COVID, because I think that's the motor that kind of glues everything we've talked about together.
Yeah. So what happened was, Owls actually started pre-COVID, and we actually were growing really nicely pre-COVID and through COVID and after. So, COVID definitely had an impact, but there are ways that it both helped and hurt at the same time. But Owl kind of came about. Again, talking about what I did in the very beginning of the podcast, being a generalist. So the ability to weld, the ability to work with all things automotive and so on. I had purchased this van to race motorcycles and go around the country racing motorcycles. I had sold my previous business. I was going through interview process with Apple and Google and all these companies that were near where I lived and obviously were very good sought after jobs. But I also had some runway, not enough runway to not work the rest of my life, but I wasn't, I could put food on the table and figure out what I wanted to do. And so I spent a lot of time working on my van. I enjoyed it and I was able to problem solve. And so what happened is I built stuff because of my history of fabrication and automotive and different entrepreneurial businesses that I had. And I would constantly get asked by people, hey, where'd you get that stuff? Because there wasn't much available for the Sprinter at the time. And I said, I didn't buy it anywhere. I actually made it. And so then people would say, hey, are you selling them? And I'd be like, no. I just made it for me, for myself. And finally, so many people started asking that I almost got annoyed, which is a stupid thing to be. But I finally went on one of the forums. I'm like, look, I'll make these things. I'm going to make 10 of these things. So here you go. And they sold out within that day. And so I'm like, oh man, okay. Now I got to make these things. And then people kept asking, hey, I missed the first 10. Can I buy one? I know you're only going to make 10. And so I'm like, okay, fine. I'll make 20. And then all 20 sold out. And then a light bulb went off. And I said, there is a demand here that is not being met. And that's when I started my research and I started looking at the other companies. And I really came at it with a game plan. So I will say that I got somewhat organically lucky that I happened, because of motorcycle racing, to have a van before everyone else back in 2010. Because I didn't like what was on the market or there wasn't things on the market, I made my own stuff because of my background that had nothing to do with going to college. And then because I had other businesses, I was able to look at the other companies in the space and what they were doing and realize that there was a real opportunity here. And so I kind of built the business on what I think are the 4 most important aspects of a business if I'm going to do and sell anything. First and foremost is design and innovation. You've got to have something that's compelling or solves a problem. If you don't have something that solves a problem, then, maybe it's a fashion brand, but that's not my world, right? So I'm not going to go into a commodity like toilet paper. Those businesses are saturated. So you've got design innovation, you've got quality, you've got to have good quality, because if you're starting a business, you want to play the long game. And so playing the long game revolves around quality. And when it also comes to quality, that caters to a higher end customer. And you always, if you're given a choice between making something for a high end customer or making something for a low end, lower price point, always go for the high, because you have to make fewer of them. You have to deal with fewer customers. Everything is simplified. And so, but you have to have better quality than everyone else. So you have to deliver to that customer because they're a demanding customer. Then the third thing is customer experience. So in this day and age, you cannot not have great customer service. And that includes, good communication, live people that answer the phones. And that's one of the big differentiators in this industry. When I started, people had no phone numbers. Competitors had email addresses. They would respond a month after you sent an email. It's no way to have a business. And so we focus really hard on customers' experience. And I won't bore people with the details of how we do that. But the fourth one, which is really important, and I think people miss this one, is storytelling.
Mm-hmm.
People's stories are compelling. How people got to where they are is compelling. The time and effort they put into something is compelling. So if I'm going to spend months designing a product for a vehicle, I'm going to have hundreds of prototypes. I'm going to have hundreds of hours into that. But what someone sees is a finished product. But so what I started doing was, from the very beginning, and people can still find these videos on my original YouTube channel, I said, you know what? If people see the journey that I'm making on this one product and how I obsess over it, I think they'll trust the product more. And so I started recording videos, and these are not produced. I didn't have a production company. I didn't have a camera person. It's literally selfie videos where I would just make very kind of almost diary-like videos of my prototyping, and I would post it and I would ask for feedback. And in doing that, I developed a relationship, if you will, albeit one where I didn't know the people, but I developed a relationship, probably like you have on your podcast, with people that watch the videos, and they trusted me because I was honest with them. So I guess a fifth pillar could be honesty, but that storytelling is critical to your success, because you can have the best widget in the world, but if people don't know it's the best widget and people don't know who the company is that stands behind it, they won't purchase it. And you can get outdone by someone that does tell their story. So to anyone that's an entrepreneur out there, you've got to execute on the first three, but I think the one that gets missed is the storytelling. You've got to do a good job talking about who you are. And I think that dovetails perfectly for your podcast. I think that people being able to see the things that you have overcome and being able to see how you bring a different perspective to these conversations is going to be a differentiator for them. And that storytelling and telling your story is going to make people more enthralled with what you're doing. And I think that's a critical component to being successful.
People buy the story, right? People want the story behind the thing, because it isn't just a hunk of metal on an adventure van, right? It's something made by this guy, and you got to hear about this company. And I bought it, and I spent a little bit more, because, and I'm loyal to this company because, well, they make good products and I've got a great story. And the same is true for our fudge company, right? We make quality products, but what stands out is, the story behind, the fudge. And you're right, like the podcast. The only people who are listening to the podcast in the beginning were friends and family, because I forced them to listen. And of course, those are the worst ones. Get the worst ones dot out, and flick the bad ones on your closest friends. But, so you create this story and this business, and you've got quality in both of them. And it sounds like you're doing really well for yourself. Going right back to the beginning when you mentioned, coming out blue collar. And it was it must have been, to the parents, it's probably as difficult as maybe another generation, I guess, coming out of the closet.
Yeah.
And not that there's anything wrong with that. But,
Yeah.
how do they feel about it now? You came out in blue collar and, well,
yeah, I mean, look, hindsight's 2020, right? So, the company being successful is looked at totally differently, right? It's the kid in the garage who's banging on his drum set, who tells his parents he wants to be a musician. And they're like, no, you need to be a doctor or a lawyer. And if the kid doesn't succeed at being a musician, the parents probably have a different view of it, rather than if the kid goes on to, I don't know, be the Rolling Stones or something. But, so hindsight's 2020, but I think that, you have to do what you're passionate about in life, and you can't live based on what other people want you to do or what other people expect out of you, because you'll live an entire life and you'll regret every moment of it. So, I had to do it, and I had to try. And if I failed, I failed. And I think that's one of the things that's really important too, is, I really dislike when celebrities who have they won the lottery. Being a celebrity, like an A-list actor. Yes, there are some very good actors. There are millions of good actors. There is a lot of luck involved with those people. And I'm not saying they're not talented, but there is a lot of luck with becoming an A-list actor.
Mm-hmm.
And for them to say things like, when I was young, I wrote a check to myself for $10 million and I wrote a date on which I was going to cash it. And that's what made me successful. I don't necessarily agree with that. I don't discount having goals. Absolutely. But there's also someone who's bussing tables in Los Angeles that wrote themselves a check 10 years ago, and they're still bussing tables and still waiting for their break. So the fact of the matter is, you need to go after what you're passionate about, but you also need to put a realistic time limit on it. Mm-hmm. So if my kid came to me and said, I want to be an actor, I would say, okay, realize, and I would do what you said with the fork in the socket. I would say, here's the deal. Not a huge barrier to entry to wanting to become an actor. So you're going to get a lot of people. It's a very difficult business where 99% of your time will be spent working hard and being told no. You'll have to have a second job until you get some success. And so understand that you will be working, long hours in a crap job and hoping for some success. Now, if you're really passionate about this, absolutely you have to do it or you'll regret it your whole life. But put a time limit on it. Give yourself 3 years, give yourself 5 years, and say, if I haven't made it in 5 years, probably not gonna make it. And the ones that don't make it, that do it for 25 years and make it, is even a smaller percentage. It's 0.001% of actors that make it when they're 50 and have never made it before that. So great. Go be a musician, go be an actor, go be a welder. And if after a certain period of time, it doesn't pencil or it doesn't make sense, then you've given it your shot, and you can't have regrets on that. You have to be honest with yourself. And so for me, it was, I can't do this corporate job thing anymore, and I'm going to give it my best shot to do what I want to do. And if it doesn't work out, then I have to provide for my family, and I'll do whatever job it takes for me to provide for my family. But if I don't try this my whole life, I'm going to be frustrated that I didn't try it. And so that's my kind of story advice for anyone, is you got to try what you're passionate about, but you also got to have a time limit on it. And that doesn't mean that it has to be your career, right? I think one of the things too that Mike Rowe always says is, this fallacy of you have to love what you do. What a blessing if you do, but you don't have to love what you do. You have to love your life. And I tell people all the time, it's one of the reasons that I think welding is such a good career. You can come in, do a job that I think I enjoy welding. It's not always a pleasurable thing. It's also a job sometimes, but they show up, they do their job, they make good money. And then you know what happens when they clock out? They have no stress. A roof rack for an off-road vehicle does not call you at 10 at night and say, hey, you missed a weld on this. that roof rack will be there in the morning and you can weld it then. And so this live work balance is important. So let's say that you're a passionate fisherman or an artist or whatever. And maybe you tried to be an artist and you didn't pay the bills. So you're working a job here, but if you can leave every day and you put food on the table and you pay your bills, and then you could do art in your spare time and on the weekends and still be passionate about your hobby. It doesn't have to be your career. So it's a blessing if it is. But one of the things that I love that Micro says is he goes, you don't have to love your job. Sometimes you just have to do your job so you can love your life. And so I think that's also a really important thing. You don't have to be an entrepreneur with your own company and be super successful to have an amazing life. The things that make me happy, fixing up old cars, spending time with my family, being in nature, none of those things really cost money. Broken cars are cheap. Spending time with your kids, the kids can be expensive, but spending time with them is cheap. Going out and camping and spending time in nature, also very cheap. So the things that I love in life don't require money. And so if I have money, great. But at the end of the day, if I did a job where I just got to leave every day and go fix up old motorcycles or old cars and go spend time with my family on the weekends, I'm going to be happy.
You don't have to love your job, what you do. I mean, that would be helpful. It would be great if you did love what you're doing. You had a passion for the work. But you do have to love what it does for you, right? And the work is what makes the money or gets you to the goal, right? Whatever that purpose is. So sometimes you got to slug it out in something that makes you miserable, because what the end goal is what's going to make you happy, or not. That's the word right. You should be happy. The job, the work, the goal shouldn't make you happy. It's the journey. So, it's what's most fulfilling. And sometimes you gotta, like Mike says, has made a career out of, you gotta walk through crap to have a fulfilling life. And maybe sometimes you gotta put a, welding apron on. And it gets hot and sweaty, and maybe leave the comfort of your air conditioning. And I was through this whole conversation, I was thinking, I'm glad you didn't get that email, me trying to back out because the AC was broken. I would have shamed your uncle. He would have been shaking his head. I've not enjoyed many days at many of the jobs I've had throughout my life. But sometimes I love the job. Sometimes I hate it.
Yeah.
I love where it's getting me and where it's gotten me in the past. So, it's another one of those times. Also, we're talking about, what, your kids, dream of for their future. My oldest, I think the last 2 years, he wanted to be a professional lacrosse player or a professional soccer player. Same thing as their actor, Hollywood actor, example. I said, awesome, but you're still going to do that book report, and you're still going to learn how to, do the math the best you can. You can get all the education you can. You can have a plan. I wish you all the luck. I want you to have a job like soccer or lacrosse that you love doing. If that doesn't work out, you're gonna be a generalist.
Yep. Absolutely. And that's good advice. And it's a good way to allow your kids to go after what they want without feeling like you've done a disservice as a parent. So let them chase their passions, but you also have to put the parameters, because that's really our job as a parent, is to add structure. It's to teach, but it's also to add structure. And because kids are little orangutans, and we have to guide them down the right path, because kids don't understand, and they don't understand where the guardrails are, and they flourish best with structure. And so they can't make a decision at
I think
16, 17 for the rest of their life.
I think a different kind of perspective on the generalist thing is what I've heard, what's called the $1 million Venn diagram, where you overlay your passions and with your skills and abilities, and whatever is in both categories, or if you have different skills and abilities, whatever, when you do that Venn diagram, what you want to learn, what you have learned, what you love to do. And when you've got multiple things that, are in the same, in that center of the Venn diagram, that's your moneymaker. That's if you're, an athlete, a leader, and you've got the welding skills, and you've got a little bit of a business acumen, then wait a second, I think they've got an idea there that might make you millions.
Yeah, absolutely. And the more stuff, the more things you try, the more things you learn, the more things you have in that Venn diagram, because the more at bats, if you will, then the more you're going to have in that crossover. So,
and more you can add together, and more options you've got. Well, John, it's fun also. I just wanted to mention that your last name, Willenborg, it kind of sounds like the guy that volunteered for the bad guys on Star Trek. I just wanted to tell you that I'm in the club. I've got the.
You're part of the board.
I've got the cosplayer.
Resistance is futile. That was my nickname all throughout high school was Borg. It's still what my high school friends call me. But
I once told the group I was speaking in front of. I said, everybody here is Star Trek fans. Remember the Borg. After getting this implant in my head, I've always wondered why was it Picard never just threw water on those guys. Electronics and matter dual mix. But anyways,
that is brilliant. I would not think of. I don't think I would have thought of that. But see,
they would have all short-circuited them. Anyways, no, I really appreciate your time. I've enjoyed this conversation. Before we end the episode, we're going to do the final segment called the Countdown to Impact. And it's just 3 questions.
Okay.
3, 2, 1. 3 books or podcasts or resources that have had an impact on your life. 2 quotes or guidelines, tips. And 1 person that's had an impact in your life. 3 books.
At the risk of sounding repetitive, I think I've already named some of these in the podcast, but as far as books and resources, I am a huge fan, because of my dyslexia. I'm a huge fan of podcasts and audiobooks.
Mm-hmm.
So, that's in a general sense. I think that, I'm a huge Malcolm Gladwell fan. And the reason is I think he takes complex, economic and kind of psychological aspects of being human, and he simplifies them into really simple, wonderful stories. And I think Mike Rowe does the same thing. And so, podcasts by both of those people, I think, and books. Malcolm Gladwell's got some amazing books, and even though I'm a bad reader, I did read those. You learn so much because they take a non-judgmental approach to something. They really take almost a scientific approach. It's like, I have a hypothesis. I don't know what the answer is going to be, but I have a hypothesis, and then they'll test it out. And they're secure enough in themselves that when they're done testing out or hypothesizing about what they think, if they're wrong, they'll talk about it. And if they find unique answers, they'll show you those unique answers. And so I think those are some folks that really move the needle, and the podcasts and books. And then what was number 2?
2 quotes or tips. that had an impact on your life?
Yeah, that's a good one. I mean, I talked about some of the quotes earlier that were big for me as far as the, being a generalist. And, I think that quote about it not being easier, you're just going faster, I think is very, very true. And then I'll say that, without going into a whole long thing that I took away, and it's not a particularly popular movie, but, there's a movie called, About Time. And it was by the same people who did About a Boy, which is a much more popular movie, Hugh Grant type of movie. So, take with it what you will. But the About Time is a little bit sci-fi, and he talks about traveling back in time to, and he can be with his family and try things over and over again. And the kind of culmination of the movie, and I'm sorry I'm spoiling it for some people, is he talks to his father, who also had this ability to go back in time. And he says to his dad, "You time travel a lot?" And he said, "No." And he goes, "What do you mean?" He goes, "I try to live every moment as if I was looking back on it from 20 years later and saying, what would I do in this moment looking back on it from 20 years? And that comes back to your not saying no to your kids. And, am I 20 years from now going to wish I finished this email, or wish I went outside and kicked the soccer ball with my kid when he asked? And that to me was really poignant. It's about the small decisions we make every moment of every day. And I can't paint a rosy picture and say that you can always forget the email and go play soccer with your kid, because you can't. But when you're saying no because you're tired, or when you're saying no because you're doom scrolling on Instagram or watching stuff on YouTube or whatever these social media time sucks are, that is something that you'll regret. And so I pulled that vignette from that movie, and it was impactful on my life, just trying to make those everyday decisions. And then, what was the last one? It was
one person. That's
one person. One person. So I think, at the risk of sounding generic, I think it would probably be my father. And the reason is that he sees the world in a very unique way. And he also did some things that I think are a little bit counterintuitive. So, tremendously successful guy, but he pioneered a lot of things that I don't think I would have realized or been sharp enough to figure out on my own. So when he started out, he was early in computers, and he did the first computer supply catalog. And he was one of the first people to have live customer service and same day shipping. That stuff didn't exist. We're talking about early 80s. You didn't order something and it shipped the same day. That's how the world worked. And he said, that's going to be critical to what we do. The whole customer service thing that, companies like Zappos have taken to an insane level, but that didn't really exist. The whole great, you're unhappy with it, we'll return it, we'll replace it free. Oh, it's broken, we'll ship you a new one right now, and just throw the other one away, not waiting for that one to come back and then ship out a new one. Just those little customer service things. And then, so the way he ran his businesses were very customer focused, not business focused. And then also, I think one of the strongest things that I got from him are ways to look at the world which are unique. One is, you have to have aligned motivations. You cannot have, and a perfect example of this is like real estate. When I sell a home, I talk to the real estate broker and I say, here's the deal. Mark, what do you think is market value for this home? And they'll come in with their comps, and I'll have done my research as well. And I'll say, great. Let's say for round math, let's say it's a $500,000 home. Okay. So if I list this on Redfin, I could probably sell it myself for $500,000. But realistically, I want more than that, because I want to maximize my value. So what am I hiring you for? I'm hiring you to maximize my value. So if you sell it for $500,000, your commission is next to nothing, because I could put it on Redfin and sell it for that. You sell it for $540,000, then you get your full commission because you're adding value. Anything over $540,000, I'll split with you. So if you get me $600,000, you made yourself a crap ton of money. And what I'm doing is I'm aligning the motivations, because real estate agents, their homes sit on the market for twice as long as the people whom they work for's homes. What does that tell you? That tells you that they are waiting to maximize value. And I want that person to maximize and spend their time selling my home. And so the idea of creating aligned incentives. It sounds so obvious in hindsight, but you can't have folks that have misaligned incentives. And I don't want to go on too long, but another one that I thought was brilliant, and it's just the way his mind works. He had his credit department came to him one day and said, his name was Jim, and they said, Jim, we're going to all go out to dinner tonight because we had our first quarter with 0 bad debt. And they were expecting an attaboy. And my dad said, I'm glad you're proud of that. And he's a really nice guy, but he said, I'm glad you're proud of that. But if you do that again, you're all terminated. And they're like, what? And he goes, if we have no bad debt, that means that you are being too strict with credit. And we are losing a large amount of revenue because you are turning away customers or businesses that would pay for the product, but you don't think they will because we have 0 bad debt, which means you're erring too far on the side of perfection. And so what he did is he said, we're going to have X percentage of bad debt. So your goal is 5% or 10% of our accounts never paying us. And if you hit that, we'll throw a party. But if you hit 0 bad debt, you don't work for me anymore. You hit 50% bad debt, you don't work for me anymore. And what he did was he viewed the issue in such a unique way that, again, in hindsight, it makes perfect sense. But who on earth would tell their credit department that they're terminated if they have no bad debt? It's an insane thing to think. Mm-hmm. How brilliant was it for him to think that way? And so he has passed on a lot of these things to me. And so they are not things that I would have thought about on my own. And so having him do those things and look at the world in a very unique way has been very impactful on my business career. So
it's really an incredible example, and being able to look at things creatively from different perspectives. And I think that's a great gift a father could have given us. It's similar to in real estate, say an apartment building where somebody says, hey, we've got 100% occupancy. And I would say that means your rent's too low.
Yeah, exactly.
So, a lot of apartment building syndicators, they'll aim for somewhere around a 95% occupancy. That means there's a little turnover and they can lose the months. But,
yep.
Awesome examples, really great. I know a lot of people have difficulty choosing one person that's influenced them. So I might have to switch that around to maybe 3 people or 2 people. But I really appreciate that. And, going back to the books, and I thought I heard a little Amos and Danny, with that fear of loss. Was it Ed Kahneman and Amos? Two researchers in the Undoing Project.
Okay.
Anyways, one of my favorite authors also. John, thank you so much for your time. If anybody wants to learn more about you, Hal, your other endeavors, what can they connect with you?
We have social media. We have Facebook. We have, owl.com, owlvans.com and owloffroad.com. And, they can connect with the company there. Happy to call customer support. As far as connecting with me personally, we are pretty busy and we do have a lot of folks out there. So, I am where emails go to die just because I am so busy. But, I always try to give people time if I can. And so if someone stops by HQ or something like that, I will go out of my way to spend some time with you because you made the journey. But, so I encourage people to, reach out and check out our stuff. And if nothing else, hopefully you like what we've been able to build and go from there.
Awesome. I'll put all those links in the show notes, and I'll be in contact for some really robust, bumper guards from my Unimog.
Oh, perfect. Let's do it.
I need something because I'll run into a lot of stuff. Anyways, John, have a great day and thanks a lot.
I really appreciate it, Aaron. Thanks for having me.